Welcome to the Twisted English Stories podcast. I'm your host, Frank Davis. This is Season 2, Episode 6, and today's story is called The Chronic Itch, and it's based on a true story which happened in Santa Barbara, California in 1979. Now, it's based on a true story, but then imagination took over. Please remember to follow us on YouTube and Spotify. Your support really helps the show. Now, let's get into the story. The Chronic Itch, Santa Barbara, 1979. Jim steered his boat, the Chronic Itch, towards the island and relaxed. She was a 41-foot cabin cruiser, and he considered her as much a part of the family as his wife and two daughters. Jim desperately needed to relax. He had retired the year before from his career as an attorney. Since then, he had been hard at work on a book about his most notorious cases. It's been too long since I've been out here like this. Jim was in the habit of talking to himself. He glanced at his watch, a Rolex Sea Dweller. The sun would set at 5:48 p.m. Marilyn had given him the watch years ago when they had first begun to make money. He chased the sun west and would arrive on Santa Cruz Island just after dark. In the meantime, the former attorney sipped coffee from his thermos and enjoyed the sunset. The sea breeze was refreshing, and the ocean was glorious. A streak of blue fire split the sky across the bow of the Chronic Itch. Bright blue flame shone electric against the reddening sky. The meteorite, or airplane, was gone almost before Jim could register it. A large spume of seawater and steam erupted from the surface of the ocean a mile to starboard. Jim couldn't believe his eyes. What had he just seen? "There's not a cloud in the sky," he spoke as if he wasn't alone. Jim guesstimated the position of the spume of water he could no longer see. He turned the wheel to the right and changed course. He scanned the ocean with binoculars and kept one hand on the helm. Ahead and to his right, starboard on a ship, Jim thought he saw something. He looked again, scanning the horizon, wary of debris from whatever it might have been. "Maybe a plane," Jim muttered. He slowed the ship. Squinting, he pulled the visor of his cap lower. There, to starboard, something in the water. No, nothing. Maybe he was dehydrated or in shock. He wasn't in the best of shape. Maybe it was his imagination. No, when he closed his eyes, electric blue fire traced arcs across his eyelids. He had not imagined it. Something orange. Yes, Jim saw something orange floating only 50 yards away. "It must have been a plane crash," Jim said aloud. He was surprised by the sound of his own voice. "But where's the wreckage?" he continued. The radio. Everything had happened so fast he had forgotten the radio. "Mayday, mayday, this is the Chronic Itch calling the Coast Guard, over." Jim repeated this twice into the radio handset. Then he stared at the radio, dumbstruck. There was no signal, no static. The radio was powered on. Jim looked at his watch. It read 5:40 p.m. "Impossible," Jim said to himself. He was close enough now to see the object more clearly in the deepening dusk. A majestic sunset crowned the western sky, but Jim had no time for its beauty now. "Geez, it's only a kid," Jim exclaimed. The small figure bobbed in the water. It was kept afloat, no doubt, by a flotation device, but Jim couldn't see one. Jim had no time for the mystery unraveling around him. He had to get the survivor out of the water. He used the rescue pole to gently hook one bobbing arm and pulled the small orange-clad figure towards him. Jim successfully pulled the survivor aboard the Chronic Itch. He looked over the gunwales for other survivors, but saw none. He bent to look more closely at the person he had just saved. "What the heck?" Jim wondered aloud as he knelt. He had expected a child's face, or perhaps a woman's face, blue with cold and wet with seawater. The face was gray and wrinkled. It was the gray of a stormy sky and wrinkled like his father's old leather bomber jacket from the war. He hadn't thought of his father in years, and he hadn't thought of the bomber jacket in perhaps decades. Jim suddenly and inexplicably missed his father deeply. "Dadgum radio!" As he spoke, the radio came alive with static. "Don't move, I'm going to call for help," Jim said to his unresponsive passenger. He had just reached the radio when gunfire erupted behind him. In the excitement of the rescue, Jim had failed to see the small Zodiac boat closing with the chronic itch. Busy with the act of pulling the survivor aboard, Jim had failed to see the Zodiac come abreast of the ship on the port side. Breathing hard, Jim's health wasn't what it should have been. He had failed to hear the three darkly clad figures silently climb aboard. Jim had no idea how he had ended up crouched on all fours on the deck of the flying bridge. "I'm in shock," Jim realized. "Mayday, mayday, they're trying to kill me," he shouted into the radio handset. He had somehow kept hold of it in the turmoil. Bullets sprayed across the ship. The bulkhead splintered inward above where Jim crouched. If he had been standing, the bullets would have stitched a neat line across his chest. "They're trying to kidnap me," Jim screamed into the handset. Jim remembered the flare gun in the emergency kit. It was a few feet away in the emergency locker. In the confines of the flying deck, there would be nothing to shield him. Oh, to hell with it. Jim started towards the flare gun. He never made it. 2 minutes later, the figures in scuba gear hoisted a bundle over the gunwales of the chronic itch. With a final glance amidships, they disappeared after it. The Zodiac sped silently to the west, towards the open ocean and towards its rendezvous with mystery. No longer speaking to himself, Jim lay face up on the stern deck of his ship. A single gunshot marred his chest. A gun, which forensics would later show fired the shot, lay within easy reach at his side. Jim was laid to rest a week later. His wife said, Jim didn't believe in suicide. She never even knew he owned a gun. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Twisted English Stories podcast. Please remember to give us a like and a follow on YouTube or Spotify. Rest in peace, Jim. This is Frank Davis here at Twisted English Stories podcast headquarters. You can hear the street noise all around me. It's a busy day. I wanted to remind you that we are very appreciative of the support, and we appreciate you following us on YouTube and Spotify. If you would like to use the stories that we tell here, they can be found in the Twisted English Omnibus. This is available on Amazon. What I mean by use is use in your ESL classroom. That being the case, if you are using our material in the ESL classroom, DM me and I'd be happy to send you a PDF of free worksheets based on all of the stories that we tell here. And thank you so much for your support. Frank Davis out.